Welcome to those of you joining us virtually via Zoom or on the phone. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy lives to be with us. We have worked to accommodate virtual participation and to provide meaningful interpretation today. For those who are just joining us virtually, if you have any trouble, please reach out to info@pfascommunityengagement.org and we can help you with any technical difficulties. Next slide, please. Before we begin today's virtual community engagement session, we'd like to take a few minutes to review the webinar platform. First, a reminder that today's webinar is being recorded. All attendees are muted and in listen-only mode until the feedback portion of this session. During the second half of the session, we will open it up for feedback from individuals who have signed up to speak. We'll first hear from those who signed up to share verbal feedback ahead of time. And then there will be an opportunity for others to share comments. We'll share specific instructions on how to share feedback using your device mic during that portion of the session. Next slide, please. First, an overview of Zoom controls. You can adjust your audio and mic settings in the lower left corner of the Zoom navigation bar. You'll use the raise hand function if we have time at the end of the session for additional public feedback. Click Show Captions to turn on English closed captioning. And I know you can also select what language you want your audio in using their interpretation button. Next slide, please. There is an English and Spanish audio stream available for this session. To access the translated stream, you must listen via online audio in Zoom, not via the call-in number. Click the interpretation icon on the navigation bar in the lower part of the Zoom window to access your translation options. Select your preferred language, either English or Spanish. If you are listening in Spanish, it is recommended to mute original audio. This option is also located in the translation button. Next slide, please. If you need technical assistance with the Zoom platform, please email info@pfascommunityengagement.org. And next slide. Before we begin, I want to highlight that we are participating in today's online event. You acknowledge and consent that your name, video, image, or phone number may be visible to others in the live online meeting as well as captured in the recording. Next slide, please. All right, well, thank you all for joining us today. As you know, today we are going to focus on a class of chemicals known as PFAS, and we plan to both describe some work the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is doing on these chemicals, and then to hear from many of you. Before we begin, I wanted to share a bit about myself, your moderator for today's session. My name is Grace Marvin, and I work for LRG, a contractor to US EPA. We have been helping EPA facilitate these virtual PFAS community engagement sessions for a few months now, and it's been a privilege to hear from so many during these meetings from around the country who want to learn more about PFAS and share their feedback with EPA. It's my job to help keep our session organized and moving along today. Again, thank you all for joining us. Next slide. So next, I'd like to share with you our basic plan for our event today. Right now, as you can tell, we are starting with housekeeping and introductions. Next, we'll turn to a member of EPA's PFAS Council, Zach Schaefer. Then we will hear a few words from EPA's Assistant Administrator for International and Tribal Affairs, Jane Nishida. And then we will hear a bit from Matt Klassen, who will share more about per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, and also about EPA's work under the PFAS Strategic Roadmap. Following these remarks, we look forward to hearing from many of you during the listening session portion of today's event. We'll share more details about how you can participate in the listening session when we get to that portion of today's agenda. But next, I would like to introduce Zach Schaefer from EPA's PFAS Council to share some opening remarks with us. Over to you, Zach.
Thank you, Grace. I can't see myself on the screen, so hopefully there I am. Thank you. My name is Zach Schaefer, and I work in EPA headquarters here in Washington, D.C. And thank you all for joining us. I serve as Senior Advisor to Radhika Fox, EPA's Assistant Administrator for Water. In the Office of Water, we are responsible for implementing two primary laws, the Safe Drinking Water Act, which protects America's drinking water, and the Clean Water Act, which helps us to protect our nation's waters like lakes, rivers, and streams. An additional responsibility I have in my job, and the reason I'm here with you today, is that I serve on the group that Grace mentioned, the EPA PFAS Council. Addressing PFAS issues is a top priority for EPA and our administrator, Michael Regan. As you'll learn more in a moment, one of Administrator Regan's first actions when he joined EPA in 2021 was to create EPA's PFAS Council. In creating the council, Administrator Regan asked us to develop an ambitious plan of action to advance science and research to restrict these dangerous chemicals from getting into the environment and to remediate the problem in communities across the country. The plan we developed is known as the PFAS Strategic Roadmap, and it's our whole of agency approach to addressing PFAS. You'll hear more about the roadmap in a few minutes. The roadmap sets timelines by which EPA plans to take specific actions across each of our major program areas, not only in the Office of Water, but in other areas as well. And in addition to these program-specific priority actions, we also included a set of actions that cut across our offices and our programs. And one of these critical areas is engaging directly with communities such as yourselves. One of the key reasons we're holding this session today is due to a recommendation from EPA's National Environmental Justice Advisory Council that we engage with communities in each EPA region. In my job in DC, I'm committed and passionate about moving EPA's work forward on PFAS, but today it's just as important that I join you all so that I can have the opportunity to hear firsthand about your experience with PFAS contamination. By listening to all of you, I and my colleagues here at EPA can have a better sense of how to have the greatest impact through our work. So thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to hearing from many of you during our listening session to come. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Jane Nishida, EPA's Assistant Administrator for International and Tribal Affairs, to share some opening remarks with us. And I look forward to hearing from Jane now and to hearing feedback from many of you during the listening session to follow. So Jane, over to you.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, Grace. And most importantly, thanks to everyone for joining us today in this listening session. As Zach mentioned, my name is Jane Nishida. I am the Assistant Administrator for EPA's Office for International and Tribal Affairs. I have the honor of helping EPA fulfill our commitments to tribal nations under the agency's 1984 Indian policy, and for representing EPA at the White House Council on Native American Affairs and providing leadership for the dedicated team in EPA's American Indian Environmental Office. We are here today to talk about a group of chemicals called PFAS, as well as the efforts that EPA has undertaken or may be considering taking to address these chemicals. I would like to start the discussion by acknowledging at the outset the experience that many of you have had with the issue of PFAS. I know PFAS has affected many of you and your tribal nations personally. I also know that a number of you who are with us here today have taken a leadership role on PFAS for your tribes and with us at EPA. For example, some of you are members of the Tribal PFAS Working Group, which is an important voice for tribal PFAS priorities in coordinations with EPA's other tribal program partnership groups. We have heard a lot from our tribal nations about how important it is to ensure that our PFAS efforts at EPA focus on unique tribal needs. For example, you have encouraged us to do research to better understand PFAS uptake by culturally sensitive plants and PFAS accumulation in subsistence foods. And we have heard concerns related to PFAS treatment, PFAS disposal, and mapping potential PFAS sources near tribal lands. Through this work, many of you have worked directly to address and reduce PFAS in Indian country. We are grateful for your dedication and for others in the audience today. and the excellent resources you have provided to everyone concerned about protecting human health and the environment in ways that honor our commitments to tribal governments and to tribal citizens. One of the themes that you will hear today is the importance of working across EPA and also with our partners in federal agencies, with tribal nations, with state governments, and with the general public to tackle this significant challenge. And a critical area of focus for EPA is to empower meaningful action on behalf of all people who are impacted by these chemicals. The feedback you provide to us today will, as Zach mentioned, help us better understand what you, your families, your communities, your nations are experiencing in order to keep us focused on protecting human health in the environment and to addressing PFAS contamination. To that end, the team here today would like to hear from as many of you as possible, and we look forward to the listening session that is about to start. With that, I'm now going to turn to Matt Klassen, who is EPA's PFAS Council Manager, who is going to walk through EPA's PFAS Strategic Roadmap. Matt, over to you.
Great, thank you, Jane, and good afternoon or good morning to all of you. As Grace and Jane mentioned, my name is Matt Klassen, and my job at EPA is the manager of EPA's PFAS Council, which is the group that leads EPA's coordinated work to address PFAS. I'm honored to be here with all of you today, especially because I've had the opportunity to engage with many of you and to learn from your experiences and priorities that have informed our work at EPA on PFAS. Today, my role is to share some information about the work EPA has done under our PFAS Strategic Roadmap, to highlight some actions we are planning to take in the future, and most importantly, to listen as you all share your experiences with PFAS to inform our work. Next slide, please. As Zach shared earlier, in April 2021, EPA Administrator Michael Regan established the EPA Council on PFAS and charged it to develop a bold, strategic, whole of EPA approach to protect human health and the environment from the impacts of PFAS. And the Council, which is comprised of senior technical and policy leaders from across EPA program offices and regional offices, is co-chaired by EPA's Assistant Administrator for Water, Radhika Fox, and EPA's Regional Administrator for Region 1, New England, David Cash, and includes Zach Schaefer, who you heard welcoming remarks from a few moments ago. And the PFAS Council met Administrator Regan's call through the PFAS Strategic Roadmap, released in October of 2021. The roadmap does several things. It includes clear timelines for concrete actions from 2021 to 2024. It fills a critical gap in federal leadership, setting a basic floor of federal protection across the country. It supports states' ongoing efforts to address PFAS by building critical science, methods, tools, and technologies. And it builds on EPA's commitment to restore scientific integrity by making science the foundation of our work. I'll return to the specific commitments in our PFAS roadmap in a few minutes. Next slide, please. Before I share more about our PFAS roadmap, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or as I'll refer to them, PFAS, and why we're concerned. PFAS captures a large group of synthetic chemicals made by humans. They consist of chains of carbon atoms surrounded by fluorine atoms. And there are thousands of different PFAS with a variety of chemical structures. Some of these chemicals have been more widely used and studied than others. As examples, this slide shows the chemical structure of two of the most widely used and studied chemicals in the PFAS group, known as PFOA and PFOS. PFAS have been used in homes, businesses, and industries since the 1940s. They have been and are used by many industries and found in many consumer products due to their useful properties. including stain and water resistance, and their beneficial role in firefighting foam used to extinguish fuel fires. Due to their widespread use, PFAS have been found in soil, water, fish, and air across the country and around the world. And surveys conducted by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention show that most people in the United States have been exposed to PFAS, including measurable levels of certain PFAS in human blood. Most known exposures to PFAS are relatively low, but some can be high, particularly when people are exposed to a concentrated source over long periods of time. And PFAS are a concern to human health due to their known or suspected toxicity. Their health effects are better known for some PFAS, like PFOA and PFOS, but much less well known for others. I'll describe a bit later some of the work EPA is doing to improve this scientific understanding. And finally, scientific research has shown that PFAS can resist decomposition in the environment and in the human body due to their unique properties. Next slide, please. The life cycle diagram on the left of this slide shows some of the ways in which PFAS are used and can enter the environment. I know some of the text on the left is quite small, but the picture helps illustrate a few major ways that PFAS can enter the environment and potentially impact human health. These ways include discharges of PFAS pollution from manufacturing facilities, discharges of PFAS-containing firefighting foam, PFAS entering wastewater treatment facilities from upstream sources, and PFAS applied to agricultural fields as a component of biosolids. Biosolids are the solid organic matter left over from the wastewater treatment process. Through these significant and diverse pathways, PFAS contamination presents unique challenges. And EPA's approach toward PFAS takes this uniqueness into account and is centered around the following principles shown on the right. First is considering the life cycle of PFAS, including their unique properties, the ubiquity of their uses, and the multiple potential pathways of exposure. Second is on getting upstream of the problem. EPA is bringing deeper focus to preventing PFAS from entering the environment in the first place, a foundational step to reducing the exposure and potential risks of future PFAS contamination. Third is holding polluters accountable for their actions and for PFAS remediation efforts. Fourth is ensuring science-based decision-making. EPA is investing in scientific research to fill gaps in our understanding of PFAS. And fifth is prioritize the protection of disadvantaged communities. When taking action on PFAS, EPA is ensuring that disadvantaged communities have equitable access to solutions. And this principle of protecting communities is a critical reason why we're here today. Next slide, please. The risks posed by PFAS demand that EPA attack the PFAS problem on multiple fronts at the same time. And the actions described in our PFAS roadmap each represent important and meaningful steps to safeguard communities from contamination. And we believe these actions will build upon each other and lead to more enduring and protective solutions. EPA's integrated approach to PFAS is focused on three goals. First is research. EPA is investing in research, development, and innovation to increase our understanding of PFAS exposures and toxicities, human health and ecological effects, and actions we can take that incorporate the best available science. Second is restrict. EPA is pursuing a comprehensive approach to proactively preventing PFAS from entering air, land, and water at levels that can adversely impact human health and the environment. And third is remediate. EPA is broadening and accelerating the cleanup of PFAS contamination. Next slide, please. In the PFAS Strategic Roadmap, EPA committed to issuing a public report on our PFAS progress each year. And in November 2022, EPA released our first one-year progress report summarizing the critical actions we've taken. Since the roadmap's release in October 2021, EPA has taken the following actions, which I'll talk about in greater detail later in the presentation. We've proposed to designate 2 PFAS as hazardous substances under CERCLA or Superfund. We've released drinking water health advisories for 4 PFAS. We've laid the foundation for enhancing data on PFAS. We've begun to distribute $10 billion in funding to address emerging contaminants under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We've expanded the scientific understanding of PFAS and translated the latest science into EPA's efforts. We've proactively used enforcement tools to better identify and address PFAS releases. And we've also released a set of PFAS analytic tools to publicly share data on PFAS in communities. And I know that developing and identifying tools like these have been a particular priority for tribes. And finally, we've engaged with federal partners and the public. Our PFAS work has been informed by public webinars, stakeholder meetings, congressional testimony, and engagement with EPA's federal advisory committees. And we're also coordinating with our federal agency partners in the Biden-Harris administration to harness the collective knowledge, experience, and capacity of the federal government to address PFAS. And in addition to highlighting the actions EPA has taken, our one-year progress report also identified a series of upcoming priority actions for EPA in 2023, such as proposing a national PFAS drinking water standard, which EPA recently announced in March, taking final action on the proposed CERCLA designations for PFOA and PFOS, continuing to improve chemical data and safety, restricting PFAS discharges to waterways, addressing PFAS in biosolids, and engaging with communities like we are here today. And I'll cover each of these overall actions and program areas in just a few moments. Next slide, please. Over the next few slides, I'll cover some important program-specific commitments from various offices here at EPA. And as I highlighted earlier, science and research are the foundation of EPA's work on PFAS. We're working to improve the scientific understanding of PFAS in 3 primary areas. First, we're working to develop and validate methods to detect and measure PFAS in the environment. Second, we're working to advance the science to assess human health and environmental risks from PFAS. Our scientists are developing human health toxicity assessments for additional PFAS, compiling and summarizing available and relevant scientific information, identifying PFAS sources, the ways PFAS move in the environment, and the pathways by which people can be exposed, and characterizing how PFAS exposure may contribute to cumulative impacts to communities. And we know that many of these sources and pathways can be unique for tribal communities. For example, we know that we need to better understand PFAS uptake by plants and animals of unique interest to tribes, such as wild rice, fish, and wild game. We also know that we need to better understand potential exposure through landfill or illegal dump site leachate and the application of biosolids on tribal farmland. And third, we're working to evaluate and develop technologies for reducing PFAS in the environment, which will inform decisions on drinking water and wastewater treatment, contaminated site cleanup, air emissions controls, and end-of-life materials management. Next slide, please. The next area I'll cover is our work to ensure chemical safety. And EPA's Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention is working on many actions to restrict PFAS. And most of these actions fall under one of 2 laws, the Toxic Substances Control Act, or also known as TSCA, and the Toxics Release Inventory Program, or TRI. First of all, EPA is working to deepen our understanding of PFAS categories through the National PFAS Testing Strategy, released in October of 2021. The testing strategy is a major step forward toward the goal of breaking PFAS into distinct categories to direct research, amplify regulatory action, and accelerate technology and policy solutions to restrict and remediate PFAS. Second, we're working under our TSCA authorities to strengthen EPA oversight over both new and existing PFAS. We're working to ensure a robust review process for new PFAS to ensure that chemicals are safe before they enter commerce. And we're working to review existing PFAS to ensure that they're being used in ways that don't present concerns and to prevent resumed production of legacy PFAS or those chemicals' use in new ways. For example, in late January, we proposed a rule that would ensure that any discontinued use of certain PFAS can't re-enter the marketplace without EPA review. Third, we're collecting data and improving reporting on how PFAS are used and released. We're working on a final rule under TSCA to better characterize the sources and quantities of manufactured PFAS in the US. This rule would collect significant new information on chemical quantities, byproducts, exposures, and disposal methods. And under the Toxics Release Inventory, or TRI, we're working to enhance PFAS reporting by proposing a rule to remove exemptions and exclusions from that reporting. And we released a proposed rule to enhance this reporting last December. This rule, if it were finalized, would enhance the data available to the public, so EPA, as well as other federal agencies, tribes, states, and local agencies, can use these data to better protect human health and the environment. And fourth, EPA is working to reduce the presence of PFAS in products purchased by the federal government. In December 2021, President Biden signed an executive order that will reestablish the federal government as a leader in sustainability. And a critical element of this action is to promote sustainable federal purchasing, which includes prioritizing the purchase of products without added PFAS. And EPA is excited to be taking a leadership role in this work. Next, we'll cover our Office of Water, where we're taking an extensive set of actions to restrict PFAS through protecting drinking water and our lakes, rivers, and streams. We know that PFAS occurrence in water is of particular interest, as several tribes have initiated PFAS monitoring of water bodies to develop baseline data. First, let's take a look at drinking water. On March 14th, EPA took a critical step to protect public health by proposing the first ever national drinking water standard for 6 PFAS, which fulfills a foundational commitment in the PFAS Strategic Roadmap. Through this proposed rule, we're taking a major step to protect public health, leveraging the latest science, complementing state efforts, and proposing to establish legally enforceable levels for 6 PFAS known to occur in drinking water. This rule is open for public comment until May 30th, and you can learn more about this proposed rule and about how to access the formal public comment docket on our website at epa.gov/PFAS. EPA recently held 2 webinars on this proposed rule, and we're making the recordings and the materials from those webinars publicly available on our website. And we'll be holding a virtual public hearing on the proposed rule on May 4th. And again, you can learn more about these opportunities to comment at epa.gov/PFAS. EPA is also working to improve the data we have on drinking water through monitoring, toxicity assessments, and health advisories. EPA is currently taking important steps to monitor drinking water in communities across the country through our 5th Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, or UCMR5. We're testing for 29 specific PFAS from 2023 to 2025 in thousands of drinking water systems nationwide. You might remember that an earlier round of monitoring from 2013 to 2015 helped us discover PFAS contamination and led to significant state and local actions to safeguard drinking water. With our latest rule, we're taking it a step further, testing for about 5 times more PFAS at significantly more water systems, and using methods that can detect these chemicals at much lower levels. These new data will be critical in improving our understanding of how communities, including low-income communities, tribal communities, and communities of color, may be exposed to PFAS in their drinking water. And to complement this work, EPA has also been conducting voluntary drinking water sampling efforts for public water systems on tribal lands. As I mentioned earlier, in June of 2022, EPA released 4 health advisories, interim health advisories for PFOA and PFOS, and final health advisories for PFBS and for what are known as Gen X chemicals. Switching to clean water, under the Clean Water Act, EPA is working to develop national technology-based discharge limits for industries that use PFAS through our Effluent Limitation Guidelines program. And this past January, we released our latest effluent guidelines plan, known as Plan 15, outlining key steps toward addressing PFAS discharges across a range of industries. Also under the Clean Water Act, we're working to address PFAS in permitting and through analytical methods, water quality criteria, and fish advisories. We're working to leverage what's known as the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit program to improve monitoring and reduce PFAS discharges to waterways. In December, EPA released new guidance to states describing how to leverage these permits and pre-treatment programs to increase monitoring, including at known or suspected dischargers of PFAS. This guidance will enable states to take appropriate steps to restrict PFAS at the source, collect important data on PFAS discharges, and enable communities to work closely with their states to take action where these discharges may occur. EPA is also working to monitor fish tissue for PFAS in the nation's lakes and to finalize a list of PFAS for use in fish advisory programs. Through this work, we can improve the information available to high-risk populations, including tribes and other communities who depend upon subsistence fishing. We're also working on improved analytical methods to measure more PFAS in more places. In April of 2022, EPA also released draft aquatic life criteria for public comment for PFOA and PFOS, reflecting the latest peer-reviewed science regarding the effects of these chemicals on freshwater aquatic organisms. We're also working, as I mentioned, to enhance data availability on PFAS in fish tissue to help states and tribes set PFAS fish advisories. And finally, as I referenced earlier, we're working to evaluate the risks of PFAS in biosolids. We're working on a risk assessment for PFOA and PFOS that will serve as the basis for determining whether regulation of these two chemicals in biosolids is appropriate. Next slide, please. This slide covers two of EPA's program offices, our Office of Land and Emergency Management, which houses EPA's cleanup programs, and our Office of Air and Radiation, where our team of experts work to address air pollution. First, I'll talk about a specific action that I highlighted earlier under CERCLA, which is the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, or more commonly known as Superfund. In September 2022, EPA published a proposed rule to designate PFOA and PFOS as hazardous substances under CERCLA or Superfund. If finalized, this rule would require facilities across the country to report PFOA and PFOS releases that meet or exceed the reportable quantity for these substances. It would enhance the ability of federal, tribal nations, state, and local authorities to obtain information regarding the location and extent of releases. It would enhance the ability of EPA and other agencies to respond to release or threats of releases of these two PFAS. And it would help establish national consistency in the evaluation and cleanup of PFOA and PFOS, and would encourage better waste management practices. As identified in the roadmap, EPA intends to take final action on the proposed rule in 2023, and will continue to work closely with stakeholders to better understand equity concerns. As an additional step, EPA anticipates issuing an advance notice of proposed rulemaking in the coming days to seek public comment on designating other PFAS chemicals as CERCLA hazardous substances. Next, under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA, EPA plans to propose two regulations in 2023. First, EPA plans to develop a proposed rule to add specific PFAS to the list of hazardous constituents, which would mean these PFAS are subject to corrective action requirements under RCRA. And second, EPA plans to clarify that emerging contaminants like PFAS can be cleaned up through the RCRA corrective action process. The third item on this slide highlights EPA's commitment to take significant steps toward updating our research and guidance on PFAS destruction and disposal. EPA published interim guidance in December 2020, and in that document, we highlighted significant uncertainties about the effectiveness of some PFAS destruction and disposal technologies. and we have a deadline to update this interim guidance by December 2023. And finally, our Office of Air and Radiation is also taking steps toward restricting PFAS by building the technical foundation for potential Clean Air Act regulation. We're working to identify sources, to develop monitoring approaches and information on mitigation technologies, and to increase our understanding of the fate and transport of PFAS air emissions. And this work will inform and support future decisions on whether to designate PFAS as hazardous air pollutants under the Clean Air Act. Next slide, please. And no conversation about PFAS is complete without highlighting the transformational investments being made in America's water infrastructure through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill, signed by President Biden in November of 2021. The bill provides the single largest investment in clean water that the federal government has ever made. The bill would build on the research, restrictions, and remediation called for in the PFAS roadmap by providing $10 billion for communities impacted by PFAS and other emerging contaminants. The bill builds on each of 3 existing EPA water finance programs, but focuses them specifically on PFAS and emerging contaminants. And it provides all of these funds without a requirement for matching funds. And all funds are provided either as grants or principal forgiveness loans. Of the $10 billion, as noted here, $4 billion will flow through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, $1 billion through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, and $5 billion provide grants to address emerging contaminants in small or disadvantaged communities. In February 2023, EPA announced the availability of $2 billion from this particular grant program to address emerging contaminants, including PFAS, in drinking water across the country. And these funds will be allocated to states and territories and will provide access to safe and clean water in small, rural, and disadvantaged communities while supporting local economies. And EPA is committed to maximizing the impact of these funds in addressing urgent water challenges facing communities. And we're thrilled that these funds will enable communities to invest in PFAS treatment solutions, while EPA continues to take action to research, to restrict, and to remediate PFAS, consistent with the PFAS Strategic Roadmap. Now, I've covered a lot of information in this presentation today, and I would encourage you to visit our website at epa.gov/PFAS. There you can find all of the information I described here and much more on the actions EPA has taken and plans to take on PFAS. Our website is regularly updated and has the latest information related to new rulemakings, new actions taken by EPA, and other related work. And with that, thank you for the chance to share this overview with all of you. And I'd like to turn it back over to Grace, our moderator, to talk more about the next part of our session, where we'll hear from all of you.
Thank you, Matt. In a few moments, we look forward to providing an opportunity for those of you who are interested to share your feedback with us. But before we do, I first want to provide you with some background. First of all, I wanted to emphasize that the feedback you share with us today will help inform future actions EPA takes toward helping communities to address PFAS contamination. One important thing to note is that the feedback you share with us will not be considered as part of the formal comment process for any specific action EPA is taking consistent with the EPA's PFAS Strategic Roadmap. If you have comments on any specific action EPA is taking, such as proposed regulation, you should provide those comments as part of the formal public comment process. You can learn more about the actions we have taken at our website, www.epa.gov/PFAS. And one other question you may have is what EPA plans to do with the feedback you share with us today. First of all, EPA does not plan to individually respond to the feedback you share today. However, we do plan to take back everything we hear from you, as well as other feedback we've gathered in other regional listening sessions we are holding to inform EPA's future work on PFAS. Now I'd like to share a few additional details about how our listening session will work. Next slide, please. So now we will open the session up for public feedback. First, we'll hear from individuals who signed up during the registration process. Before we get to those folks, a couple of tips on how to share verbal feedback. If you signed up ahead of time, you'll receive a message in Zoom, a pop-up and you need to click on that pop-up to give so that you have speaking permission. So when you see that, please click on the link. When you have speaker permissions, we'll call your name. I'll call your name out. And at that point, you should unmute and begin speaking. You're welcome to turn your video on or keep it off. And please limit your comment to 3 minutes. And I also want to mention that if you have trouble clicking on that pop-up or unmuting yourself, you can email us at info@pfascommunityengagement.org, and we will try to help resolve your issue. And if for some reason you're unable, we're unable to help you and you're not able to get through once we get through the speakers who have signed up ahead of time, we'll have time to open it up for feedback for anyone else who's on this meeting who would like to provide it. So I'll tell you all how we'll be running that process a bit later on. Okay, so I think let's see who we have ready to give public feedback. This process might take a few minutes to get someone. So we're kind of working behind the scenes now to pull up one of our speakers for public feedback. So again, if you do see a pop-up in Zoom, you do need to click on that and accept the pop-up so that you have speaking permission. So we'll thank you for your patience, and we'll just wait and see if we can get one of our speakers here. Thank you for your patience. We have a couple folks that we know that we're interested in speaking, and we're just trying to get them. Okay, so it looks like we do have one of our speakers ready. Rhonda, can you go ahead and try speaking? See if we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. I'm a chemist by training, originally from New Jersey. I currently live on the Big Cypress Seminole Reservation in southern Florida. The Seminole, I'm not Seminole, but my husband and my daughter are, kind of speaking on their behalfs. The Seminole tribe has many reservations all around Florida, including some that are impacted by military facilities and airports and industrial facilities like that. So I am very pleased that EPA is studying this and hoping to regulate and decontaminate areas, because again, not only are the tribes difficult to reach sometimes, to know whether or not they're having any issues, but they didn't cause the problem. You know how it is with so many environmental issues. They didn't cause the problem. So I encourage you to move forward with this work and protect those communities that are disproportionately affected and not responsible at all for the contamination that they experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rhonda. We really appreciate your feedback. So I think we looks like we might have already gone through our speakers that have signed up ahead of time to provide comments. We'll give it just another moment to see if we have anyone else. If not, we'll go ahead and open it up to the rest of the group on this meeting to provide feedback. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and let everyone else know how you can provide feedback now that we've gone through those who signed up ahead of time. All right, perfect. Next slide. All right, so since we do have time left, we'll open it up. If you would like to give feedback, please click the raise hand button in Zoom. Please keep your hand raised until you've had an opportunity to give your feedback. And you will also receive that pop-up in Zoom. And you will need to click on that to accept the ability so that we can make you a panelist and you're able to speak. If you can also, so unmute your name or number when that's called. You may share your webcam video if you'd like. If you're joining via phone, you should press *9 on the phone to share a comment. Please unmute and begin speaking when you hear your telephone number called. All right, I think I see a couple hands have already gone up, so we will see if we can work through those. Give us just a moment while we grab those speakers. All right, so R. Higgins, we see that you're ready. Can you speak and we'll let you know if we can hear you.
Hi, Rebecca Higgins. I actually work for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and I am a full tribal member of the Red Lake Band of Ojibwe. And I do not ask this question on either of those behalfs, but I do want to ask a general question related to the discussion around CERCLA enforcement and how that may be implemented with tribal communities in terms of the discretionary authority related to the CERCLA enforcement actions potentially coming down the pike.
Thank you, Rebecca. So as I mentioned earlier, we aren't answering questions on this meeting, but we are taking your input and any questions that you do have back to inform our work. So we appreciate that comment. Okay, so it looks like we have, I think it's Monty Froke. If you're on, we'll see if we can hear you.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yep. Say, this is Monty Frank. I'm the Tribal Emergency Manager with the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe here in Minnesota. You brought up about with the PFAS question, being also a firefighter, you brought up the PFAS in firefighter foam. I also want to bring up an issue that we're seeing also, and that is which we are seeing in who are firefighters in our bunker gear. We have also realizing there is PFAS in firefighter bunker gear. And I know many organizations are bringing that to light. That is also, it could be a cause of cancer to, especially to tribal firefighters, if they have older bunker gear or turnout gear to fight fires because of the amount of PFAS that was in those chemicals used to make the protective fibers to keep us safe going into a burning building or a low hazmat situation with that one. So then it comes into the aspect is not only are we concerned about the foam, but if we're concerned about the PFAS in our bunker gear, if looking to mitigate this effort, would there be anything to help tribal fire departments to also possibly offset the cost of replacing maybe older bunker gear that may contain the PFAS chemical which is a cancer-causing agent to something that maybe isn't? And maybe they do not qualify for a grant or other funding sources because a lot of times grants for bunker gear are very competitive, and a tribal fire department who may really be needing that may not be picked for the FEMA grants to replace that bunker gear. Third question: if PFAS is found, in tribal nations, how will maybe I missed this? How will this new PFAS work coordinate with tribal biologists or tribal public works people to help mitigate it out of their water systems in the future if it comes back as maybe a PFAS positive case? Thank you.
Thank you, Monty. We really appreciate that feedback. Let's see if we have any other speakers who would like to give public feedback. All right, I see a couple more hands went up, so let's give them a moment to to get ready here. Okay, so it looks like we have Paige ready. Paige, if you can try speaking, we'll let you know if we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Awesome, great. Well, my name's Paige Hingst. I am the co-leader of the Tribal PFAS Working Group. One of the feedbacks or comments that I would like to give is that we would appreciate if the Office of Research and Development could focus more on plant uptake of PFAS, such as like culturally sensitive plants. There's been a lot of focus on fish. We know that's important, but a lot of tribes rely on wild rice. They rely on other plants for medicinal purposes, and those also can be exposure pathways to them. We really need to have more studies on them and keep the fish studies and keep, maybe up the studies on the wild game, deer, antelope, elk, that are subsistence foods for tribes. We really need to have that information so we can, make judgment calls for our tribes to decide, how we're going to protect ourselves from exposure when we don't even know what's out there. So that's my comment, and I thank you so much for taking my comment and letting me speak today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paige. We appreciate that feedback and taking the time today to join this meeting. Let's see, I think we have someone else ready to speak. Jim Griffin. Jim, if you're, can't hear you quite yet, so maybe see if
Okay,
you're
there we
on
go. Sorry.
mute.
Sorry
Oh,
about that.
perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Thank you.
Okay, great. Zach and Matt and Jane and Grace, I just wanted to thank you. You did a great job with the presentation. Really, really good. I represent a company called Miwok Construction. We're Super 8A construction company, tribal, and out in California. I am actually in Arizona. But we deal with a company called ProSil Eco, ECCO, ProSil Eco, which is a very, very deep nano-based type technology that goes into the soil, can lock in the contaminants in the mining industry, which are much more dangerous actually than the PFAS. So we know we can lock in the PFAS. And one of the questions I had was on landfills. Is there going to be, we're going to be attending an organization's conference next week called SWANA, the Solid Waste Association of North America. And they have a conference there called SOAR, which is Sustainability, Operations, and Recovery. And it's very, very environmentally based, and all of the design people that are designing landfills in the future, what they should be doing with that soil before they're even thinking about building a hole and being able to put all these contaminants that are going into those landfills right now as we speak. So what organizations are going to be controlling that design process of that, so that we can talk to these design individuals and let them know that they can't continue to keep building these landfills the way they're building them. They have to start thinking outside the box and come up with a much better scientifically proven type technology that can lock the PFAS and PFAS in, and it will not go down into the water table. So I just didn't know what organization would that be, and who would we contact to try to continue to promote this, because we will be promoting that when we go to Atlanta next week. So that was just my question I had, was on landfills.
Thank you, Jim. So we aren't answering questions on this meeting, but we are taking your input and questions back to inform our work. But thank you. So it looks like we do have another speaker ready. Amy Rosenbrow, can you hear us? Or can we hear you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Amy Rosebrough. I am the water quality manager for the Pueblo of Sandia. I just wanted to start by saying that from what I've heard from industry workers, treatment capabilities might not be up to par with the standards that are being proposed. So I would like to ask that kind of a plan is laid out and process so that we can see how treatment capabilities will be improved, and then how enforcement will actually work if treatment capabilities aren't up to par yet.
Thank you for that feedback, Amy. So our next speaker that we have ready is Kristen Hansen. Kristen? Can't hear you quite yet, so maybe just see if you're on mute.
Good afternoon.
Great, we can hear you.
Great. I listened to the presentation, and similar to the support and resources that are being offered or going through states, tribes are in a similar situation that could use direct resources and support for some of the same type activities. I am on the Environmental Response Program coordinator within the Natural Resource Department of the Lac du Flambeau Band of Lake Superior Chippewa in northern Wisconsin. We do have low-level detections recently found in our drinking water, and we largely live in an unaccessed area. This isn't an area where PFAS has been looked for quite a bit. It has been more of a response-driven state instead of a survey-driven states. We do have tribal members living off reservations that are affected also by PFAS, and they're living outside of the state service area. So we're giving support there for their drinking water. We also need to identify our sources, update our regulations, look for sources. One of the unique situations here is we've become a magnet for biosolids land application because of some regulatory loopholes. So in the situation where there are fee simple lands, 40 or 80 acres, completely surrounded by tribal lands in an area of heavy resource use or resource gathering, the state has, they don't use the word permit, but they have approved land spreading sites that are getting 3 counties worth of septic, sewage, and land spreading debris within reservation boundaries. And we are uncertain on what's in those biosolids, including PFAS risk. We've become a target for that because we're in a wooded rural area where there isn't a lot of agricultural fields. So in this case, forested lands is being cut down, converted into an agricultural land spreading area in the middle of reservation lands. We also have concerns in fish. We have been working with UW-Madison, and we have projects set to go for sediment, fish, rice, but we would need funding resources. We have looked to sample our landfill, and we did have a project in place planned in 2015, but there was a changeover in the district engineer, and they chose a different approach. So instead of sampling for PFAS, it was a breakup into these smaller tasks. We also need, like the previous speaker, support for our water treatment. Like many in this area, we shallow sands in a sole source aquifer in a place that's more wet than dry. So our water treatment facility and technology to support that is certainly important, especially when we're starting to see it in our drinking water. Also, public outreach. So identifying those sources in our community, whether it's floor wax in the school that's getting into our wastewater treatment facility, or ways to reduce its cycling in our ecosystem here. Now, putting things through the state can be problematic. We waited 6 years to get a table that showed eaglet blood sample PFAS results that the state had collected on and near reservation, and we still lack lab results or units on it. So we have direct needs that might not be best met through flowing through a state. But thank you for taking our comments.
Thank you, Kristen, for your time today and for that comment. I think we have a couple hands still up, so let's see if we are able, if anyone would like to speak. Give us a moment. Okay, so let's do a last call for speakers. So if you would like to provide feedback, use the raise hand function in Zoom. We'll just give it another minute or so. Okay, we're just checking to see if we have anyone who wants to, okay, so I think, yeah, we don't have any more. Okay, we have someone. So Philip, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I just had a
Okay.
question. Do you have an idea where you're going to test for already? I mean, do you have like a list, like I'm in Oklahoma, like we're going to test at these, these cities, these towns. Do you already have that laid out?
So we aren't answering questions on this meeting today, Philip, but we are taking your input back to inform our work.
Okay. Do you know how I would, I mean, I guess then you couldn't really tell me how I could find that out either.
We'll definitely follow up with you. If you want to, we have a couple more slides at the end. You can email us. We can get in that have email information, contact information. So we can, if you want to email us, we can definitely get you to someone who can answer your questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, appreciate that. All right, so I don't think we have any other speakers for today's session, so we'll go ahead and move into our closing here. So thank you so much for sharing your feedback with us today. Before we close, I'd like to turn it back to Jane to share a few of the major themes that we heard this afternoon.
Thank you, Grace. And again, I want to thank all our tribal partners for sharing this important feedback with us today. So this is a summary of some of the feedback that we heard. First of all, the disproportionate impact of PFAS contamination for our tribal nations, and examples that you gave in specific ways in which PFAS has impacted you and your tribal community. We heard some specific concerns about PFAS contamination sources, including military bases, industrial facilities, airports, and biosolids, and the importance of holding polluters accountable. We also heard specific concerns about PFAS as it relates to firefighting, the challenges not only of foam, but also with regards to equipment and gear and the cost associated with those replacements. We also heard about the unique challenges of PFAS to tribal communities, and this is in particular in terms of communicating with your tribal communities and the coordination between tribal governments in terms of identifying and the cleanup efforts with regards to PFAS. We also heard about the importance of EPA research that is critical to tribes, and not only focusing on PFAS research as it relates to impacts on fisheries, but also the importance of PFAS research with regards to plants, particularly wild rice for many of the tribes in the Midwest, as well as wild game. We also heard about specific issues related to CERCLA enforcement actions, and also in terms of landfills, designs, and solids, asking questions there in light of some important engagements. And then in addition, we heard about the importance of public outreach and sharing data with tribes. So I think that is a general outline in terms of what we heard. And then the final thing is about the importance of promoting technologies to help with the cleanup and treatment of PFAS, particularly with regards to drinking water and again, landfills and biosolids. So I think that is a quick summary of what we heard today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. So I do want to highlight that you may continue to share input after today's event via email to pfascouncil@epa.gov. And as we noted earlier, first, the feedback you share with us orally or via email will not be considered as part of the formal comment process for any specific action EPA is taking under the PFAS Strategic Roadmap. You can find more information on EPA's efforts on PFAS at the EPA's website, epa.gov/PFAS. On that site, you'll find links to each of the major actions EPA is taking under the PFAS roadmap and links to formal comment opportunities for each action through an online docket. And second, we do not plan to individually respond to the comments we receive, but we do plan to synthesize what we've learned from this session and from each of our EPA regional sessions to inform EPA's future work on PFAS. Next slide, please. With that, I would like to thank all of you so much for joining us today, and a special thanks to each of you who shared feedback with us. I'd also like to thank Assistant Administrator Nishiba and Zach Schaefer and Matt Klassen from EPA's PFAS Council for joining us as well. Thank you all again and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.